Righty. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you find yourself today. You are welcome to Leadership Academy. And again, it's going to be an exciting one. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me? I don't get the sound levels here. I don't know if anybody can hear me. Kwame.
Yeah.
Okay, so it means I am loud and clear. How are you doing, sir?
Doing all right. Yourself?
I'm doing awesome.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for joining us
Who else
today.
we got on, man?
They'll be coming. My co-host is running a little late, but he's going to join us soon. Yeah.
Cool.
All righty. Let's zoom straight away into it. Last week we were not able to make it due to some inconveniences beyond our human capabilities. So that's the only way I can put it. But other than that, every week we're here Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And those of you who are joining us from Ghana, it's 8 p.m. Ghana time. We are still talking about the corruption facing the continent of Africa. And today we would be talking about the effects of the corruption in Africa, how this cancer called corruption is affecting the continent of Africa. As I said the other time, we would also be talking about how corruption was packaged and was placed on the laps of Africa. We'll be talking about that later down the line, because this is a long series we are dealing with. It's not going to end today. We probably will have a couple of runs on this series before we will close the curtains on the corruption plague, which is deeply eating the African continent up. Just before we start with the topic, I want to go over our usual declaration that creativity and inventions are not done by the color of one's skin. I want to repeat this. Creativity and inventions are not done by the color of one's skin, but by an educated mind. And so it does not matter the color of your skin. If you educate yourself, you'll be able to create and invent. With that being said, I just want us to zoom straight. Yeah, Prof has joined us. So I just want us to zoom straight and just give a little recap of what happened the previous week, and then we'll zoom into today's discussion. We're trusting to stay within 30 minutes, but sometimes the discussion goes beyond that. And like I said, we're trying to break the discussions into segments on YouTube. So anybody who would want to get the discussions in segments because of data, we understand. Those of our brothers and sisters who have to purchase data to be a part of the program or to watch the program, we get it. So we're going to make it possible for you guys to be a part of the program as well. So, well, I was tempted to say last week, the previous weeks, we've been talking about whether the culture of giving in Africa is an incentive for corruption in Africa. And Prof did a lot of research on that and did a lot of talk on that last time we met to debunk that perception. And so we know that the culture of giving is not just African. It is a human attribute. So anywhere you find human beings, you're going to find the culture of giving. And so how come that Africans are using that as a clutch? It tells you that because we don't have systems in place to check human attitude, because if you allow any human being, irrespective of the color of their skin, they would do what they think it's right, or they would do what you think or is crazy. So I remember the first time I saw some craziness in the US when we've all already been conscientized, or we've been, should I say, brainwashed, that you can't see such a thing in the United States, where I saw somebody peeing outside. And I was amazed. I was like, wow. So it happens here too. Yes, because it's a human institution. So whatever happens to Africans, or whatever you can think of, whatever race you can think of, happens everywhere on the planet Earth. The only difference is that because leadership is up and doing, they decide to set up certain frameworks and certain institutions that would check human behavior, the excesses of our behavior. And that is what Africa is lacking as of now. So we have a free range of corruption, and not just corruption, but things not going well in Africa. And we still don't have systems in place to check them. I believe the other time we spoke about systems working, and we spoke about when we had an encounter with a fire outbreak and how the fire service could not even get there on time. And it's chaotic just because the systems are not in place or if they are in place, they're not functioning. Let me put it that way. They're not functioning to benefit of our community. So in the first place, we've debunked that perception that our culture of giving is an incentive for corruption. Without much ado, I would want Prof to introduce himself and give his opening remarks a while as I go on Facebook to check on those who are watching us from Facebook as well.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nana, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning to anybody who will eventually stumble upon this. My name is Kwajo Ewua Frimpong, and as usual, my co-host and executive producer has already debunked the idea that invention or ingenuity is by the color of one's skin. It's just by an educated mind. We at AfriWeek, that's our understanding of human nature and human progress. We all need to remember that at some point in time, Africa was at the forefront of everything intellectual, everything scientific. We didn't build the pyramids because we don't have ingenuity. There's a lot that has gone on in Africa back in the days, and it's time for us to reclaim those glory days. Yeah, we should not think that they are behind us. That's number one. Number two, culture. What is culture? culture is really the way a group of people decide to live, norms, and culture is dynamic. If there is something cultural that is holding us back, then it is imperative upon us to change that culture to suit where we want to be or where we are going. And if we think that the culture of giving is the recipe for the so great amount of corruption that goes on in Africa, then change it. It's cultural. Change it. But that is not even true. But let's say it was true that it is giving that allows us to be so corrupt. And we have seen the insidious effects of corruption in Africa. So why not change it? There are a lot of cultural things that we have changed. So if giving is the issue here, we need to change it. But we've already debunked the idea. It has nothing to do with giving, but much more with selfishness and greed and stuff like that. And we need to change it. Thank you. And that's going to be my opening remarks.
Alrighty. We have Mr. Kwame Buffy too online. Mr. Buffy, if you have any submissions, the floor is open.
As it stands right now, I'll probably pass. I don't have anything to add. I'm just here to be a listening ear. As times go, if I have anything, I will chime in and add it.
Okay, yes. On this platform, if you have questions, even if you don't agree, we accept all that. You table all that here because we believe that discourse is the foundation for ideas. So we believe in discourse on this platform. There's one thing we don't do on this platform is to argue. We don't argue on this platform, but we can disagree with somebody's opinion and table our opinions. Argument means that we have an entrenched position and we are pushing it down the throat of other people. We don't do that here, but we discuss issue here. In other words, we table our opinion. You disagree or you agree, you table your opinion. We go back and forth and we pick and learn from each other in order to be better ourselves, to be able to sharpen our minds and to improve on our lives and improve on our communities as well. So discussion is allowed here. Differences of opinions are allowed here. Don't be scared. Don't pull back, just table them. But insults are not allowed on this platform because I have never seen insults building or encouraging people anywhere. Insults brings anarchy, it brings fights, it brings confusion. So we don't entertain insults on this platform. All right. As Mr. Kwadwo said, the issue of giving, if it is cultural, as some people want us to believe, then why not change it? Because we're not a static society. Every society is supposed to be dynamic. Every group of people are supposed to be dynamic. If you have a static society, then there's a problem. So if we think the culture of giving is the reason, then we have to change it. So today we're talking about the effects of corruption in Africa, the effects of corruption in Africa. Like I said the other time, when we're talking about corruption, it's a very emotional topic because we spoke about the fact that about, is it $5 billion taken from Africa every year? So come to think about it. And this is a community where we're struggling with very basic communities like water, shelter, education. You go to some schools and they have only one textbook for a class, and they have to pass that textbook around. Whereas somebody is getting kickbacks of thousands of dollars within that community, which can go a long way to help alleviate some of these problems within our community. And one of the areas I realized that corruption is affecting a lot is education. Why education? Because, you see, if our society is going to be creative, if our society is going to be inventful, we have to educate the people. Mind you, I'm not talking about schooling, I'm talking about education. And so our political managers are making education suffer, or are making us suffer from lack of education, in the sense that if we get educated, mind you, I want to repeat this, if we get educated, what is going to happen is that we are going to be enlightened. We're going to be enlightened. And so we will be able to challenge the status quo. We'll be able to help and force change the status quo. So one of the areas suffering is the area of education. Apart from the fact that the monies that are supposed to go into education is not going, the other aspect of it is that they are leaving our system as a schooling system so they can continue to rape and plunder our coffers to their benefit. Because when we are schooled and we are not educated, we're not enlightened to understand their role and to demand accountability from them. So one of the areas corruption in Africa is suffering from is education. And that is the foundation of our development. That is the foundation of our development. We're talking about systems being set up to control all these craziness going on in Africa, stems from an educated mind. And so if the people who are in the helm of affairs know and understand that when the people are educated, if the people, somebody says, are awoke, they know what is going to happen to their coffers. They know what is going to happen to them. Because people are going to demand accountability. And after demanding accountability, guess what is going to happen? Punishment. Because you cannot mess up and go scot-free without paying the consequences of it. One thing we have established on this platform, that everything in life operates on principles, operates on laws. So if you violate the law, you would have to face the consequence of it. I can't stand on top of a 3-story building and jump and expect to be suspended in the air. It's not going to happen. The law of gravity will get me. That is life. And so if the people are educated and they are woke, they are going to demand sanity in the system. And that is going to go against our political managers. So they have to do everything possible to keep education away from the people and keep schooling the people so they can have absolute control over the people. I know Mr. Kujua is itching to jump in. So I'll pause here for him to get in and then we'll come back.
Yeah, normally I don't really like picking statistics that were not made by us, for us. But this one comes from a 2002 African Union study. You mentioned 5 billion, bro. It is $150 billion a year.
My bad.
$150 billion a year that is estimated to leave the shores of African government coffers into individual pockets. 150.
And that research is what year?
2002 African Union Study on Corruption. 150 billion. Okay. And you need to compare that to how much we get from our so-called developmental partners. In 2008, our developmental partners gave Africa $22.5 billion in aid. $22.5 billion in aid. We are talking about $150 billion each year vanishing into thin air. You compare that to about 22 or $23 billion a year. You make the deductions. Why do we even go begging for aid when right there under our feet we have so much being siphoned out of our coffers into individual pockets? $150 billion minus $30 billion. So all this going around begging for money from outsiders, if we could fight 20% of corruption in Africa, 20%, I am being very realistic here, 20% of corruption in Africa. I know we are trying to stay in 30 minutes, so I'm not going to go into
Go ahead. As a matter of fact, let me just interject with this. Talking about aid to Africa. Remember, I don't know if you were on when I started by talking about, as we go along, we'll discuss how corruption was prepared and placed on the lap of Africa. It stems out of the aid to Africa. So just continue. I just wanted to chip that in.
Today, we just want to set up the outline for us to understand that endemic corruption is something that is killing us. That is all I wanted us to set it out, so that in subsequent series, we look at the critical individual effects of corruption on Africa. And as you have mentioned, aid, I'm looking at the numbers. If I am losing $150 billion to corruption, and I'm getting back $30 billion, I'm being generous here. What's the point of what I'm getting back? Any intelligent mind will come to the conclusion that 30 billion is actually 22.5, but 30 billion compared to 150 billion, it is a lot better to tackle the issue of corruption and graft within our systems. Because every time you don't see a classroom block, every time you don't see a textbook, every time you see bad roads, other infrastructure, it means the money found its way into somebody's pocket. Because all these infrastructure and social projects that make sane societies, they have already been put in place in Africa. But the money to fund it, it is not an issue of the money not being available. I'm talking about 150 billion known. We are not even talking about perception. We're talking about what we actually know. What about the amount that we don't know, that never comes to light? You see, we are losing $150 billion a year to corruption while we don't have rules, we don't have school blocks, we don't have even the classrooms. And I've been around, used to think it was an issue of remote villages. You'll be shocked to go to Kumasi, Kwadaso, and see the kind of classroom blocks that students, the so-called leaders of the future, are learning in. So the question comes back to, is it working for us? I've told you some of the phrases I don't want to hear is, this is how we do it here. The question is it working for us? So it is imperative, the onus is on us as Africans to find a solution to this canker called corruption, because it is killing us. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Another dimension I wrote down here to add to the issue of education is the fact that, number two, anytime we talk about educational reforms, it means that our political managers will have to go to the international community to beg for money, right? And you know that our educational system benefits the international community as it stands now. Our schooling system benefits them. So because of corruption, when you go over to get money or to beg for money, I'm not even going to talk about getting loans or whatever, to beg for money to come and reform your education. Anybody in his right mind, you think is going to give you that money? When I know your system your status quo as it stands now benefits me, and then you come to me to beg for money to go change your educational system or your schooling system into an educational system which would not benefit me at the end of the day, you think I'm going to give you that money? Now, when they're going to give you that money, it's going to come with stipulations. You can do this, you can't do this, you can do that, you can't do this. And yet, because, oh Jesus, Lord help us, our political managers are not thinking about reforming the education. There have been a lot of educational reforms, especially in Ghana. We've had a lot of them, where they go to IMF, get the money to come and reform the educational system, so-called educational system. And guess what? Part of the money is diverted into places we don't even know. You see, so this trend continues. Why? Because it is benefiting somebody privately. Because a percentage is being diverted, or a certain amount of that money is being diverted somewhere. And so they come and do some kind of shabby reforms, and they tell us, oh, this is, I'm sorry to say, look at Ghana schooling system. How many times have we gone through reforms? And if they tell you the amount of money they put into the so-called reforms, you're going to be amazed. And yet we cannot produce quality students out of our schooling system. So that is another aspect of it, where people would have to go to their masters, yes, to their colonial masters, and beg for money to reform their schooling system. They don't even have the confidence to go and get that money from them. Because that money, one, it's not going to go to whatever it's set to be going to do. And two, that they're not going to give you that money with free hands to do your reforms, because at the end of the day, if that reforms is done and done properly, guess what? It's not going to benefit them. You see, this whole chaos going on in Africa is not random. As I said earlier on, that everything in this world operates on laws. There are laws behind the scenes in operation that is creating the chaos in Africa. But how long are we going to blame my grandma, who never stepped a foot in class 1 would always tell you this. If somebody pushed you down, don't expect that person to help you to stand up. Because if he wanted you up in the first place, he wouldn't have pushed you. You see, so until we get some leaders on the continent who understand that the foundation of our development is our educational system. And so I always use Magufuli as an example. Look at the amount of money he retrieved from cleaning up the corruption in Tanzania alone. And that enabled him to do projects in Tanzania without going to beg anybody for a dime. You can check his records, the 5 years of his reign.
He
didn't even go for these meetings and what have you. Sorry, you were saying something.
I say he never went anywhere.
Yeah.
He was busy building his country.
Yeah.
He didn't go anywhere. He was not even interested. He already knew. You see, this is so wide a topic. We will really have to do justice to it.
Oh yeah, it's not going to end today. So go ahead.
We will have to do justice to it. It comes with, if we really want to fight corruption, it comes with what do we really want to build as our societies. You brought about the issue when we were in Ghana and a vehicle was on fire and we just stood there and it just burnt to ashes without a single policeman, without a single fireman coming to the rescue of these passengers. What society do we want to build? That's the question every leader should be asking himself the moment he steps into the office of being a leader. What society do we want to build? If it is a sane society in which there are known processes and consequences and stuff like that, that will make it an effortless society, then we need to put in these kind of things that we're talking about in order for that society to become a reality. If what we are seeing is what we want, then why not continue in that trajectory? Because it's very easy to destroy stuff. Building stuff takes a lot of effort. And that's what I see. You were talking about Magufuli and what he went through the mill, he understood the problems, and he charted a course to solve them. That is where we need to start from. And sadly, you don't see a lot in any place in Africa when you talk about this anti-corruption issue. We put in names and whatnot, and then we look, 150 billion. I'll come back to that every day when we start this discussion on corruption, compared to $22.5 billion. Which one is more important?
It doesn't make sense.
Which one is more important? 150 billion known amounts leaving government coffers into private pockets each and every year. That was in 2002. I don't know the amount today.
So that was like what, over 2 decades ago?
2002, we are in 2023. Yes, 20 years ago. That's the available data.
And
150 billion.
150 billion. And who came up with this statistic?
African Union. The African Union itself. I did not go to Transparency International and all those organizations. I don't trust them. They always want to make us look bad. But when your own brother tells you you are losing $150 billion a year. And
now when you say we're losing it, right? Who are we losing that money to? Are we losing to just a few people in Africa, the continent, or are they siphoning the money into like their like coffers in the States or in other foreign countries?
Okay. The monies that get out of Africa, the amounts that go to individuals is infinitesimal compared to the amount that actually leave the continent. So that money is not staying in Africa. That money is leaving.
Okay.
And that's why Mr. Osebonso was telling us that you are going to beg somebody to give you money to reform a system that will not benefit him. What makes you think the person will give you the money for that? The $150 billion, they are leaving Africa. I can give you a prime example.
Sure.
About 30 years ago, somebody in Houston was put in jail for some grand scale corruption in Nigeria concerning the petroleum industry. His whole duty was to come in with money, pay individuals in the Delta region so that they can transport crude oil out of the country without even having checks and balances in place. You know, Halliburton, you can do the research. One of the executives, low-level executives. At the time, guess who was the president of Halliburton? Vice President Dick Cheney.
Cheney.
Was president of Halliburton.
Right.
Somebody was put in jail. Nobody was put in jail in Nigeria for that incident. And if you look at that case alone and the amount of money involved, you will cry for Africa. You will surely cry for Africa. So this is what is happening. Somebody comes up with a deal all over Africa. Individuals who have vested interest, certain amounts of money, we can take them case by case. I'm just giving the general description. Right. And then this vested interest will make it easier for foreign companies, foreign individuals to take money out of Africa, enriching themselves as individuals. And that's where my stance on corruption comes from. Look,
all is well. I don't know what pretending all is well means. Is that?
One of the first bills that President Biden signed was the protection of Asians, or whatever they call it, simply because a lot of people were beating Chinese people. They were attacking them and all that during the COVID. So the moment he stepped into office, that was one of the first things that he did. He signed an executive order. It wasn't an executive order. I will have to look at it again. It was a bill. I have to agree.
It was a bill.
Okay. Why? They are very powerful. African Americans have been fighting for a bill to be signed into law for about 50 years now. 50 years. Every time we introduce anything in the Senate, it gets stuck. The reason being that Africa has no teeth.
Right.
We have no teeth. And my emotional attachment to corruption in Africa is because until as a group we develop, nobody will respect us.
Right.
I found that out when I was a student in Canada. They treated these other people much better than they treated African students. Because guess what? 90% of Ghanaians studying in Canada never went back home. But the Orientals, even on their breaks, they went home because they had something to go back to. And that was where my perception about Africa and corruption and the lack of development developed from. Until we developed our own continent. They need to respect us. Nobody's going to give us that. Respect is earned, it's not given.
Yeah,
and until we fight corruption, nobody's going to respect us. So to answer your question, that 150 billion, it gets out of Africa.
Okay.
The amount that stays in Africa, in individual African packets, I don't know the exact amount, but it's very little. And
Right.
that's why we need to understand that the 22.5 billion that we get in aid is a drop in the bucket compared to
Yeah.
what we
I mean, talking about respect, how would somebody respect you when what you're doing does not make sense? You're chasing let's say $23 billion a year, whereas you're losing $150 billion a year. It doesn't make sense. So they will look at you like there are no substances between your ears.
Right. And that 22 million or billion dollars actually comes with a lot of
Strings.
strings attached to it. Yes.
Yep.
I don't know the details, but I know that I'm not really into politics that much, but I'm trying my best to get into it because I know that everything revolves around it, whether you like it or not. Our whole lives, will revolve around it. Whether you like politics or you don't like politics, that's irrelevant to what happens on the ground. So
Yeah. So it doesn't make sense if you go to IMF or wherever to go get some money, beg for money, and they know 150 billion is coming out of your continent every year, and then you want to come back for 22 billion. It doesn't add up.
Right.
It doesn't add up. Look at Nigeria. You spoke about Nigeria. Was it Sani Abacha or one of the ex-presidents of Nigeria had his money confiscated by the World Bank some time back? I don't know if it was confiscated or I think there were they wanted to retrieve that money back into Nigeria, but there were some back and forth on that issue. I think it was like $5 billion or something like that. And you think about it, just one person. So that is even the one that is known. How about the one that is not known? And when you think about it, even half of that money, if it is being used properly, do you know how far it will go to bring relief to some people in Nigeria? You see, so some of these things really don't make sense. And yet somebody was talking about negotiations when they have to negotiate properly. How can you negotiate properly when you are negotiating with somebody who knows you're not making sense to him? So as Prof said, you cannot earn that respect. How many of us would always look at people where we know they have dirty dealings, and when we see them, we go like, what the heck? Look at this man. Look at this man. Even though we may not be bold enough to say it in your face, but we say it in our minds. So basically, that is how they see us. No wonder when you go, they put some stipulations around the money you're coming to beg. There was one time, okay, I don't want to mention names, but a Ghanaian president flew almost about 20 dignitaries from Ghana to DC to receive an award of about 50,000 US dollars. 50,000 US dollars.
doesn't even add up.
So you think about it, about 20 entourage, hotel bills, traveling expenses, and loan will finish up the $50,000. So sometimes we do some of these things, it really doesn't make sense. And as Prof was saying, instead of us cleaning up the system, changing our attitude, setting up systems that will retrieve this money this 150 billion that will stop it from bleeding. Even if we can stop 100 billion from bleeding, you can think about how Africa is going to be like.
And it's every year. It's not just
Right.
50, it's not just 100 billion.
So if we can stop it from bleeding, how are we going to chase 23 billion when you have 100 billion? So it's like the adage that we go to fetch water with
A basket.
a basket.
Yeah. Only
You
a
know,
fool.
it's only a fool who does that, and it does not make sense. That is why we are pleading with our political managers. Look, you are not going to be respected. You come to the United Nations and give all the speeches, they look at you as a fool. I remember I fell for some of the speeches of one of these African, with one of these Ghanaian presidents, and I thought, this is it. This is the man. And it was all just blowing hot air. You know, so we're going to end with the effects, just this one. Next week, we're going to talk about some of the effects. We're going to go deeper into some of the effects, how it affects our health system, the health sector. It affects every fiber of our society. It even affects our dignity in the first place. It affects our dignity, as Prof said. It affects your confidence. When you know you are going to negotiate with somebody who thinks of you as a fool.
Hold on.
How confident are you?
I'm surprised you are using the word negotiate. They don't negotiate anything.
Well,
they don't.
You're right.
They do not negotiate anything. There's no negotiation.
Yep.
They come and they talk down to us. This is what you need to do. That is all there is to it.
Yeah.
They give it a nice word and say, we're going to, you are going to what? Negotiate from a position of having nothing? How do you negotiate? What is the points on which you are going to look? The structural adjustment program of the 1980s, when we were young and we saw it, it was just shoved down on us. Period. Yep. Depreciation of our currency is just thrown down on us. Do this. That's all there is to it. Simply because they know you have nothing. So unless we sit up and we decide what society we want to live in, and we build the structures to bring that into reality, we will continue to have this conversation. And Kwame, I'm very happy about you bringing that, the fact that you are not very political. AfriWeek is apolitical, but everything under the sun revolves around politics. The food you eat, the water you drink, the roads you drive on, every single thing revolves around politics. So when it comes to issues concerning society, there is no fence. You are either on the right side or on the wrong side. There is no fence. You can't sit on the fence. And that's what brought some of us into these discussions, because I am also apolitical. But you have to be very political when it comes to things that affect your daily bread. And that's what AfriWeek is trying to do.
Because whether you like it or not, politics is making decisions on your behalf.
Right. Exactly.
You know,
it's not about voting for this or that. Nope. It's about having a voice. That's all there is to it. Yeah. You cannot sit on the fence. When you get to know some of the things that go on and their effects on you as an individual and their effects on your progeny into the future, it will be very, very difficult to just sit.
With that being said, Prof, just give your final remarks and we'll take it from there.
Okay, what I would like to say is that corruption is like you said, a very emotional issue, and we're going to do justice to it. We're going to take its effects one by one. And then we need to understand that it's such an insidious issue. Every single effort that we can put into combating it, nobody can make Africa corruption free. It's impossible. But for $150 billion a year, if we can reduce it to, let's say, 50 billion, I'll give thanks to the Almighty. That's my final take.
Nobody can make Africa corruption free. That's impossible. Yes, and nobody can make any human society corruption free.
Exactly.
That's impossible. They will still find a way to, corruption will still find its way into human existence. But at what rate is the question. Mr. Kwame Burfy,
Yes, sir.
any final submissions before we close the curtains for today's discussion?
I think you have said it all. I'm good.
All righty. Thank you so much for being a part of Leadership Academy today. We're grateful for investing your time into this program. Next week, same time, we're going to be here to continue the discussion on corruption, the cancer called corruption facing Africa and eating Africa. I want you to join us next week. Invite a friend to invite a friend. When you see our posts, please share it and invite people to be a part of it, because it is important that we all come together to fight against this cancer called corruption. Thank you for your time. My name is Nana Osei Bonsu, Jr. of Africa International Organization, and my co-host, Prof. Kwadwo Ewua Frimpong. And we had Kwame Burfy on set today. Thank you all and stay blessed. Bye-bye.
Bye.